John Scully. Happy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. What's happening?
Happy 2023.
Yes, sir. You too.
It's been a minute since we've talked. I've been busy with the holidays and work. So here I'm back. And I got many boxing fans asking about Beterbiev versus Yarde. What's happening? How's everything going? I know you were in Montreal. I don't know if you're still in Montreal, but everybody wants to know.
Well, it's kind of funny, right? Now, I always say this. People, I was just saying, I did an interview the other day, and the guy, we were talking, and we were talking about fighters, and I was explaining. I said, after one particular fight, you know, I had trouble making weight, right? So before the fight, he had asked me how I felt, and I said, "Oh, I feel great. You know, everything's great. You know, I'm ready." Then after the fight, I lost, and I was like, you know, I had a lot of trouble making weight. He goes, "Oh, well, I interviewed you before the fight. You didn't mention that." And I said, "Well, that would be kind of stupid, right? Like, for me to tell you before the fight that I was having difficulty, it would make no sense." So I could tell you Arthur looks great. He trains great. He's in great shape. He's focused. But that's what everybody says. We all say that. So, yeah, Arthur looks great. He's training great. He's in great shape. He's very focused.
The question is Yarde okay? Because Yarde just had a fight. So we hope Yarde is okay so he doesn't come up with any excuses.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't even care. Like, it makes no difference to me what your problem is. Like, a guy, opponent, you know, I don't care about you. Like, if you have an excuse or whatever, we just want to win, whatever that entails. That's what we're ready to do. So, you know, I think Yarde is a good fighter. You know, he presents problems. You know, I see a lot of people. Well, it's funny. Human nature, you know, people are easy to read, right? Like, if Pacquiao has a fight coming up, virtually every Filipino person online is going to say he's going to win and he's the greatest fighter of all time. You know, so you take it for what it's worth, right? So the only people I see saying that Yarde is going to win are people from the UK. Those are the only people I ever see predict victory. You know, so it is what it is. Now, but with that said, Yarde is a good fighter. You know, I've been watching him. He's good. You know, he's tricky. He's better than some people give him credit for, I'm sure. And, you know, it's a real fight. We have to be on our game to beat him, for sure.
We spoke about this briefly the last time around, and I did mention that at the beginning, I heard pretty much everyone saying that Beterbiev is going to crush Yarde. But the last couple of weeks, I've heard some say that Yarde might give Beterbiev trouble. So let's see what happens.
Well, you know what it is? That's another, you know, phenomenon with boxing, right? Like, people will, the more, like this, and this is a fact, and everybody does this. And I don't anymore because I caught myself, like, you could, it's why the internet is so dangerous, right? Because you could go and think, like, right away, people would say, "Oh, Arthur's going to kill him," right? But then they go on the internet and they read so many things, and they're saying to themselves, "Man, I read this guy said he thinks Yarde has a difficult style that's going to offset Arthur." And then they start believing certain things and repeating certain things that they don't even realize they're saying. All they're doing is saying what some guy on the internet, who they don't even know who the guy is, he said it, and they got it in their brain. So that's why, you know, the vibe on the internet before fights is so crazy, because I'll see people repeating things that Jim Lampley said 2 days earlier. And I'm like, man, you don't even have an original thought. You got that from Jim Lampley. I saw the same interview. I saw him say the same thing. So, you know, or Max Kellerman or whoever says something and people will just repeat what that person said, hoping that nobody saw him say it and that they think that this is the person's original thought. So I think, like I say, Yarde could be stylistically difficult, but ultimately, you know, Arthur brings issues with him that I just don't think Yarde is going to overcome. I would, you know, if I had to bet on it, I'd bet that is what is going to happen.
Do you think it could possibly be because of, you know, well, we've talked in the past about like some boxing fans not being able to see the boxing skills in Beterbiev. They see him as a puncher, but they don't see the boxer in Beterbiev.
Right. It's amazing that people, well, you know, everybody's a boxing fan. Like on the internet, everybody's a fan to a certain degree. You know, they know a little something. People who don't have a serious boxing mind, an IQ, would look at Arthur and think he's a destroyer. He's got no skill. Like they associate the thing. The same thing like with Tyson. Like people to this day claim Tyson is just a skillless brawler, banger. But if you watch Tyson, especially when he was younger before he went to prison, his defense was unbelievable. Like the way he moved his head. I mean, he was like a Pernell Whitaker at times of a heavyweight. You know, he could make these big guys miss. And people, you know, if you said to someone, yeah, Tyson had good defense when he was on his game, and people will go, oh, no, he's just a face first banger, because they don't know. They don't know what they're looking at. And, you know, Arthur is very smart. And I think most real boxing people over the last few fights, I think they're starting to realize, they're starting to see the subtle skills that Arthur brings. You know, the way he beat Marcus Brown and the way he beat Joe Smith was tactical. It wasn't just a destroyer. And there's a big difference between the two.
I think with Mike Tyson, now that you mentioned Mike Tyson, I think the reason why so many of us looked at him as a puncher, not a boxer, was because of the time that Mike Tyson was fighting, and you know, Holyfield came along and Lennox Lewis came along. When you compare those three, Lennox Lewis was a 5-dimensional boxer, and Holyfield was also a pretty good boxer for a heavyweight. You know, coming up from a cruiserweight.
Right, but you got to understand, they didn't fight until Tyson didn't fight Holyfield until 1996. You know, he had already been a pro for 11, almost 12 years. You know what I mean? I mean, that's a huge thing. He didn't fight Lennox until almost like 18 years after he turned pro. He turned pro in the beginning of 85, and I believe him and Lennox fought in 2003. I mean, you're talking different lifetimes. You know, the Tyson of 1986, 1987, 1988, 1989, that's a different fight, man. You know, we'll never know what would happen, but that's a different fight. Mike was not physically, psychologically, emotionally. He was a completely different person by the time he fought Evander and Lennox.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But, you know, if you compare Beterbiev to Vostok, remember when Beterbiev fought Vostok?
Yeah.
Vostok was a pretty good boxer. I mean,
yeah.
A-level fighter, and Beterbiev destroyed him.
Right. And he destroyed him with technique. You know, he took his time. He broke him down. I mean, you know, like I say, Arthur, it's amusing almost that people say, you know, oh, he's just a banger, he's just a puncher. I said, man, you gotta wake up, man. Like this guy, he's technical, he's setting you up, he's planning things. Arthur is an extremely, you know, guys like you know, Crawford and, you know, even on a bigger scale, like Roy Jones and Floyd Mayweather, they're obvious. They're the type of people that your grandmother could watch and go, wow, he's good. That guy's really good. Like they've never seen a fight in their life, but you know Roy Jones is good. But you could watch Arthur. If you never watched a boxing match, you wouldn't know if he was good or not. You'd have no clue because you couldn't recognize what he was doing. It's a big, big, big difference.
Well, yeah. I mean, since you mentioned Roy Jones Jr., when I first began as a boxing fan, getting right into the sport, like, you know, watching Roy Jones Jr. and James Toney, those two guys caught my eyes.
Right.
Phenomenal,
yeah, sure.
phenomenal boxers.
Right.
Both.
Right. Yeah, both of them, all time. Yep.
Are you still in Montreal?
Yes. Training camp. Yep.
Okay. So, what's the crowd like there? Right there, everybody's hyped about this fight.
Well, I mean, I don't really get out. I hang out with the sparring partners, and we just, you know, we have our little routine places we go. So, you know, I don't know much about like the only people I interact with who are from Montreal are guys in the gym, you know. And I know the guy at the hotel front desk. He's pretty excited about the fight, you know. And I know I go to a restaurant here called Three Amigos, and the head waiter there, he's pretty into it too. So I do know that some people I know personally are into it, but I haven't really been out there, you know, among the public. But I see former world champion Paul Banky is watching. He just asked when the fight was. Paul, it's the 28th of January. The fight is in England, so you're going to have to watch it on TV. So the 28th of January, a few weeks from now.
I've been to Montreal before for some boxing, and the fans there are very hyped, and the atmosphere is just crazy. Like, it's party city.
Oh, when they have a hometown guy, you know, like when Matthew Hilton used to fight, and those Willette and those guys, I mean, yeah, they're like, it reminds me almost of British crowds, you know. They're into it, you know, in Australia, different places like that. They're very into it. They're very, you know, Montreal's a big boxing city. When they get someone to follow, they're a big boxing city for sure.
Have you been hanging out with Beterbiev, like, you know, going out for lunch, dinner, or, you know, doing some fun things outside?
He doesn't, you know. We went out to dinner one night. We went shopping actually at the mall. You know, we hung out for a while one day, but he generally I just, you know, we leave him alone, and he's really a family man. He prefers to be with his kids and his wife. He's at home, you know, the majority of the time. So that's his thing. But yeah, we did, Arthur and I by ourselves, we went out one night, and we went to the mall, and we hung out, we ate, and, you know, but in generally speaking, we just see each other in the gym.
Well, what does Beterbiev say about Yarde? Has he said anything about Yarde, like what he thinks about him as a fighter? Has he watched him fight before? Because I know in the past you've told me that Beterbiev doesn't really like talking about boxing.
Right. Yeah. We watched the films together. You know, we that's his extent of it, is watching the films. He hasn't said much. You know, he doesn't. He lets us make the plan, and, you know, we tell him what we think he should do, and he pretty much trusts that. I'm gathering, and so yeah, he's not a big guy to watch fights religiously. You know, he doesn't. You know, it's kind of amusing in a way to me. Like, he doesn't really know boxing in terms of who's champion today, and, you know, like I would assume, like, if Terrence Crawford walk up to Arthur on the street, I don't think Arthur would know who there was. I don't think he would recognize Terrence Crawford or any of those guys.
I'm not sure if I've asked you this question before, but I've spoken to a few fighters that I think the same way as Beterbiev. Like they don't really talk boxing. They're fighters, but they don't really follow boxing. Why is that? What do you think that is?
Well, you know, some guys are just good at boxing and that's their job. You know, they're good at it. They just happen to be good at boxing and they make money boxing. Where other guys love boxing and they love the other fighters and they, you know, it feeds them. So everybody's got their you know, motivation. And I remember, matter of fact, I have to ask Michael, but Michael Nunn, before I ever got to be friendly with Michael, I remember hearing that he didn't watch boxing. He didn't really know who anyone was either, you know, but I know now we're friends, we talk, and he seems to be more up on the game now. But I do know fighters who really don't know. You know, it's kind of funny. I remember Marlon Starling, you know, Marlon Starling and I spend a lot of time together, and he doesn't know people, fighters. Like he wouldn't know Errol Spence. If Errol Spence walked right up to him, he would have no idea. And I can remember a time, believe it or not, in 1997, when Oscar De La Hoya was at his peak fighting Whitaker. I was with Willie Pep, who's one of the greatest top 10 of all time, legend. I was with Willie. He was going to Las Vegas. They brought him out to the fight when De La Hoya fought, I think, Pernell Whitaker. And I'm talking to Willie. You know, I was driving him to the airport, and we're talking. And it became very apparent to me that he had no idea who Oscar De La Hoya was. He just, all he knew was he was going to the fight. They were flying him out. I don't think he ever saw De La Hoya fight. He didn't know how De La Hoya fought. He didn't know his style, you know, which I thought was kind of amusing because I was talking to him like he knew who Oscar was. And yeah, like I said, as the conversation went on, it occurred to me that he has no clue who Oscar is. And he didn't care. You know, it just, you know, at that level, he was so high above that level, I just don't think he cared.
Hey, speaking of Willie Pep, is it true that Willie Pep had a fight where his opponent didn't touch him at all? Is that true?
In a round, there was one round.
Oh, one round.
A guy named Graves in Minnesota. The legend is that he told a sports writer, he said, "You watch, I'm going to go around. This guy's not going to touch my face." And the legend says he did it, and he won the round on the judges' scorecards because the guy, his defense was so good. Now, there's some people who've questioned if it's really true or not. I don't think I asked Willie about it. I don't think I ever talked to him about it, so I'm not really sure from his point of view. But there are people who say that never happened. But that's the legend that it is. And I could see it happening, you know, maybe against a guy, maybe not against a world-class guy, but against a guy, you know, a lower level than Willie was at. I could see him, you know, outboxing a guy so bad, and his defensive skills, even like a guy, Pernell Whitaker, has slipped punches so well in a round, so impressively, that you probably didn't realize that he didn't hit the guy that much. You know, he hit him somewhat, but he didn't hit him that much. But his defense was so impressive that you'd say,
so if you had to pick between Willie Pep and Pernell Whitaker, who's the best defensive fighter there?
you know, it's hard to say because, I mean, it's like at that level, right? At that level, there's not that much difference. You know, you could say Willie's the best. You could say Pernell's the best. If one of them is the best, the other one isn't far behind. So you wouldn't be wrong picking either one of them. You know, the thing is, Willie, people might remember him differently than Pernell because Willie got stopped a few times. But they have to understand, he had more fights like in 4 years than Pernell had in his whole career. You know what I mean? So he got stopped later in his career. You're talking about a guy who had 241 pro fights. You know, he had more knockouts, and Willie wasn't a knockout puncher, but he had more knockouts than Purnell had fights. You know what I mean? So to go that long, you know, 27 years, I think his pro career was 26 years, you know, it was pretty impressive. So, like I say, I mean, they're both, when you're at that level, you know, pick one or the other, and I can't say you're wrong.
Hey, speaking of these defensive wizards, we saw Ellis versus Villa last night. Did you watch that fight?
Yes.
And Ellis was looking somewhat like, you know, Willie Pep and Pernell Whitaker.
Right.
He wasn't getting touched, but then we saw what happened at the end. He got dropped twice, and he ended up losing that fight.
Right.
What's your thoughts on that fight?
I think, and I've said this for a while, I think Rashidi Ellis was a top prospect, like very talented. But last night illustrated the huge difference between, I would say, like amateur style, amateur mentality, you know, being just a good boxer, right? You're just, you know, you're fast, you're this and that. You get away with it with a lot of people, but that was a professional fight. It wasn't an amateur fight. And, you know, you see a guy, like you'll see a kid come out of the amateurs and he's like 100 wins and 3 losses. He's just a monster. He wins every tournament. The guys can't touch him. He's super fast. He can do all the skills and all the moves, and everything is brilliant. But doing that for 10 and 12 rounds is a different world. You know, anybody can do that. You know, I never go by, when you watch a 10 or 12 round fight, after the second round, everybody's like, oh, the guy's going to win. I said, man, look at it. It's only the second, third round. Relax. This is a professional fight. They change from minute to minute, from round to round. Last night was the perfect example of that. And if they went 12 rounds, you know, Rashidi might not have made the distance, you know, because you just, all that movement, it wears you out. You have to get acclimated to fighting that style over a distance like that against a guy who's relentless. So I think Rashidi could have gotten the decision. He could have got it, and I don't think people could have really complained. But pro and amateur is different, and the guy proved to be more of a well-rounded professional fighter than Rashidi did last night. I think Rashidi is like a lot of guys who he's super talented, and he's super fast, he's super skilled, he's flashy, he's all that stuff, but you need more to be a real legitimate championship level fighter. And like Pernell Whitaker was everything that Rashidi is, but Pernell had that ability to dig down when he needed to. He could get in the trenches when he had to. And, you know, Rashidi's still young as a pro, and he got worn down, and I think he learned a lesson last night. You know, it takes more than just skill and flash and speed to be successful in this game.
Hey, since you mentioned Whitaker once again, you know, I was talking to him one day at the Hall of Fame, and I said to him, I'm surprised that Tito didn't knock you out. And he turned around and said, what? Did you want me to get knocked out? What are you saying?
Yeah. He was, you know, he's lucky in that regard, but it shows you how great he was, because even faded like that, you know, a destroyer like Tito, he was able to avoid getting knocked out by Tito. You know, and that points to his greatness. You know, that won't be remembered as one of his greatest moments, but as a fight person, deep, you know, through and through, I recognize that him going the distance with Tito at that time was a huge thing. You know, it took a special fighter. There's not many guys at his age with that many fights, and, you know, and I'm sure he had not been living as clean as he should have, to go the distance with Tito like that at that time. That was pretty impressive.
It sure was.
Yeah.
It sure was. But speaking of Ellis, he seemed to want a rematch, and Villa said he's okay with giving him a rematch. What
Yeah.
do you think? What do you think would happen in a rematch if a rematch were to happen?
Well, it would depend on Rashidi. See, because like I say, I know he has the skills, the speed, the style. I know he has that. You don't know if he has the extra stuff. And last night was the first time he was tested, I'm assuming. And he didn't, he didn't pass. He didn't pass. He wasn't ready for that. Now, if he can get ready for that and keep one step ahead of this guy, I think he could turn it around and win. But we're going to, two things come into play. One, he's going to have to adjust his skill set, his style to compensate for what he was lacking. But also mentally, he's going to have to be a different person. And like I say, when Purnell was in situations like that, Purnell would dig down. He would sit his butt down and he would get into it. He wasn't afraid to get into it with you. Where last night, I honestly, by the body language, I think Rashidi, I think that's the first time he was in that situation. I think he couldn't believe it. I think he was surprised and kind of panicked a little bit. He didn't know how to really respond on a world-class level. And I think, it's going to depend how he can adjust in the future if that event, if that result would change.
I think, in my opinion, I think that Ellis was having fun. He was doing good until that 7th round. From the 7th round on, once Villa began touching him up on the body, Ellis began to complain about low blows.
Right.
Right. So I think at that point in the fight, Ellis felt those body shots, and he felt like he had to make an excuse because he didn't want to get touched down low.
Right. Well, it's, if it was blatant, I could understand it. But certain guys have something in them. And I always look at the body language. I pay close attention. Take, for example, James Toney. James Toney was a guy. Now, some fighters get hit, say you get hit in the back of the head, and they'll look at the ref and they'll, like freak out almost. Like, oh, come on, ref. Look, he hit me in the back of the head. Where James Toney, you could elbow him and he would go, okay. And that would be his mentality. He wouldn't freak out. He wouldn't change his expression. He would just be like, all right, okay. Now we're fighting. Now we're fighting. So James had a mentality that he projected that was different than most of these guys have. And Rashidi needs a little bit more of that.
It's a good point that you brought up Toney because, when Toney fought Holyfield, we all know that Holyfield's a dirty fighter. He was a dirty fighter.
Yeah.
And Toney didn't complain. Toney didn't complain at all.
That's what I'm saying. That's a perfect example. Like, and it happened in a lot of fights with guys, but that was a good example. Like, believe me, there's guys who are top fighters who, fighting Holyfield, they would have looked at the ref every time Holyfield blinked too hard. You know what I mean? They would have looked for an edge. They would have looked for some kind of excuse. And James just brushed it off. And that's why James is an all-time great fighter, because he had that mentality.
Toney sure took Holyfield to school.
Yeah, sure.
But what happens now with Ellis? Because Ellis was hoping to fight Boots Ennis.
Right. Yeah, look at you. You've got to go back to the drawing board and realize that, like I say, there's a million people in history who've been fast, sharp, slick, all of that. They look like $1 million for 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds. In the gym, they look like $1 million against everybody. Doesn't matter. You have to look good in the 9, 10, 11, 12th round against everybody. He didn't. So he needs to regroup, see if he's willing to learn how to get better from this, if he's willing to learn how to get in better shape because of this, and go from there. You know, and who knows? He may not want to do it. He may not. Some guys, when they realize their skill and their talent is only going to take them so far, and I'm not saying this is him. I'm just saying in general terms, when they realize they're going to really have to be an animal in the gym to really prepare for this type of, you know, career, they don't want to do it anymore. You know, they preferred it when their skill and their talent brought them to that point, and to go farther, they're not so having so much fun anymore. You know what I mean? So that's what separates the real men from the boys, and we'll see. And there's no, and he can say whatever he wants. You know, he can make any excuse, he can make any promise, but we're not going to know until he's in a fight like that again, and we'll see how he responds.
Well, I said it last night before the fight ended. I said the question now is, can Ellis take Villa's punches?
Right.
Can he absorb Villa's punching? And that was the key.
Right.
If he could have gone the whole way, you know, without going down to the canvas, he would have won for sure, no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, that's why knockdowns count. You know what I mean? Like, you know. But listen, let me just tell you something. You have a very special guest. Lamar Kid Fire Parks has joined the conversation. Lamar was, if you're young, you may not know, but Lamar was a top middleweight back in the day, amateur and pro. Very skilled, very high level WBC #1 ranked contender, and he's watching. So I want to give Lamar a shout out. He was a beast back in the day for sure.
I'll check him out. Hey,
yeah,
you know, I always learn something new with you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, you'll be impressed. Lamar was a beast for sure.
Even when we hang out at the Hall of Fame, I always learn about these old timers, and
yeah,
you know.
Yes, sir.
I'll definitely keep an eye on him. But going back to Ellis, do you think he was overconfident? Because prior to this fight, right before the fight, he was pretty much saying that everyone was afraid of him. Nobody wanted to fight him, and that he was willing to fight Boots Ennis, and even that fight didn't happen. So do you think he was overconfident going into this fight?
Yeah, probably. You know, I'll tell you what. It's an age-old thing. You get a kid who's fast, slick, you know, combination puncher. Everybody's talking about him, how good he is, all these type of things, right? And then you fight a guy who's and you gotta say, I'm not being racial, I'm just saying, like, you fight a guy from Mexico, Ecuador, you know what I mean? You fight a Spanish guy, you figure the guy is gonna be aggressive, he's gonna be strong, but he's gonna take punches, and I'm gonna look like $1 million against him. And I'll tell you what, there was a kid back in the day, Ricardo Williams, who was a special talent. Like, Ricardo was a very high level special talent. And he ended up losing to a guy in the pros who was like from Venezuela, you know, not a well-known guy at all. I had never heard of him, but the guy just kept it going. Took kind of like the fight last night. The guy took it to him, and he beat Ricardo. He beat Ricardo because it was a professional fight. Professional boxing is much different than amateur. And these guys find out the hard way that that's a fact. That guys you would beat easily in the amateurs, if you don't have that dig down mentality later in the second half of the fight, you're not going to beat these guys. These guys are feeding their families. These guys are trying to make money to feed their families. You know, some guys make money because they want to buy a car and a gold chain. Other guys fight because they want to feed their children. And when you come to the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th round, you're going to have to decide what your priorities are and how bad you want it. And in most cases, the guy fighting for the kids is going to win.
So I'm guessing Hector Macho Camacho was fighting for his gold chain.
Yeah, well, you know, no, but Hector was when he fought Chavez, Hector proved he had heart. he definitely proved he had heart, for sure. Like, behind all that flash and all of that, Hector proved that he was a dirty dog if he had to be, 100%.
But you know, after that fight with Chavez, Hector Camacho was pissing blood. That's what I heard. He was pissing
Oh
blood.
yeah, well that's what I'm saying. Like, he went the distance with Chavez, you know, and the body shots, you know, Chavez was in his prime at that time, you know. So yeah, no, Hector was a dog for sure. He had heart for sure.
And speaking of these foreigners, I just remember when Segundo Mercado gave Bernard Hopkins a tough fight.
Yeah, he dropped him. He dropped him a couple times. Yeah,
first fight, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But now I'm moving on to Boots Ennis. Boots Ennis also, you know, he won, but I wasn't too impressed. Were you impressed?
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and I said it on Twitter while it was happening, like around the 7th round. I said he needed this. He needed this fight. He needed a guy that he wouldn't just blast out. You know what I mean? Boots is a very good fighter, and he's definitely going to be good if you're there for him to hit. You know what I mean? He's going to look like $1 million. But a big part of professional boxing is trying to track these guys down, trying to fight a different style, you know, figuring out a guy that, you know, is not easy to figure out. And he ran into difficulty, and, you know, I think it's going to help him grow as a fighter. You know, people say, oh, he should have just blasted the guy out. Well, it's a lot easier said than done. You know, these guys, when you get a guy who's a defensive fighter and he's got skills like that and he's got a mentality like that, you know, and the guy obviously was good. He had a history. You could see. I'm sure he had a lot of amateur fights, that guy. So Boots didn't look like $1 million. But that's professional boxing. You're not going to look like $1 million every time out. And if you do, all that means is you've been matched well, where you've been manipulated to look good all the time. You need a guy to make you look apprehensive, you know, to take you to a different place. So that was a learning experience for Boots. You know, people get so excited about a guy. Like, you had people all over the internet for the last year saying this guy's the best welterweight in the world. He's a beast. He's going to kill everybody. Well, relax. Like, you got to see. I mean, it takes a lot more than that.
I just didn't like the fact that Boots Ennis was complaining about his opponent moving around, saying that his opponent was running. I didn't see his opponent run.
Well, I'll tell you what. I was joking about this just 2 days ago with somebody, and I'll give you an example. There was a guy I beat years ago. I beat this guy. I outboxed him. Got on my toe. He was a tough guy. I got on my toes, outboxed him. Now, that was years ago. To this day, I've seen the guy a few times, and he said to me, you ran. I said, listen, everybody who can't hit somebody says the guy ran. If you could hit me, you would have, but you couldn't. So that's your fault, not mine. It's not my fault that you didn't know how to cut the ring off. I mean, what am I supposed to do? Stand there and let you not have to cut the ring off and hit me like you so badly want to? You know, Boots, that's why I say Boots is a good fighter. Of course he is, but he didn't cut the ring off. Tommy Hearns would have cut the ring off. You know what I mean? If Tommy Hearns fought that guy, I bet you he cuts the ring off easily. You know, you have to know how to do it. And if you're not used to doing these things, then, you know, that's why I say you see a guy, he's 100-0. He's had 100 fights, and he's brutalized everybody he's fought. Well, trust me when I tell you, there's somebody on this earth who's going to give him problems with the right style. And it might be a guy whose record is 24 wins and 12 losses. You know, it doesn't have to be an undefeated guy. There's guys out there who can fight and test you, and they don't have good-looking records, but they know how to fight. And, you know, matchmaking is important, but you also have to – you can't just go through everyone and expect that to be, you know, your MO for the rest of your career. You're just going to blow everybody out. You need tough fights to get ready for the real big fight, so you see everything and you're prepared.
That's right. That's right. So, what do you think about boxing fans now pretty much shitting on Boots Ennis, saying that he's not ready. He's not who everyone thought. And they're just discrediting him. And
Well, they're the people that I'm talking about. You know, they buy into all these things because they see an undefeated guy, and if he doesn't kill everyone, then all of a sudden he sucks. You know, like that's the telltale sign. If I'm killing people, I'm a beast, and if I go the distance, I suck. That's your opinion. You know, that's just insanity. It's just stupidity. You know, you have to know what you're looking at. You have to know, the style of a guy, and who else is. I mean, do you think other people are going to look good against that guy? Everybody would have had trouble with that guy because he could move, he could box, he was skillful. Like I say, I bet the guy had a ton of amateur fights in Europe. So Boots Ennis will come back his next fight. He'll obliterate someone in 2 rounds, and everybody, those same people talking crazy today, are going to be saying Boots is back. Boots is a beast. He must have been sick last fight. You know what I mean? So you're only as good as your last fight. That's an age-old adage. Everybody says that. You realize, like, before Tommy Hearns knocked out Roberto Duran, before he killed the Roberto Duran, a couple fights before that, he went 12 rounds with guys, and he just looked regular. And everybody was like, oh, Hagler's going to kill him. Then he obliterated Roberto Duran. All of a sudden, everybody forgot those fights, and they went, he's going to knock Hagler out. This is I can't believe it. Hagler's about to get knocked out. People forget, whether it's good or bad, people forget. They forget if you were good last fight, and they forget if you were bad last fight. They just go by how you did yesterday.
Boxing fans are quite something. Like, they can turn on you.
Yeah, listen, they will go and they will turn on you in a minute. And then when they see you, they'll ask you for your autograph. They will ask you to take a picture with you. It's like you see guys online, and they trash you, and then they want your autograph when they see you. And I've had it happen to me. I had a guy, and I don't know who it is. I had a fight, the worst fight of my career, admittedly. I was on TV. I was really losing weight horribly, and the next day, somebody drove by my house, and I was in the house, and it was summertime, so I had the front door wide open, and somebody said, "You suck, Scully, you suck." I promise you, I ran out because we had this pile of bricks in the front yard. I ran out, and I had every intention. I said, I'm going to throw this brick right through the window. They're going to crash, and then I'm going to pull them out of the car, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to talk about his comment, and we're going to figure it out. And that's the thing why people can say whatever they want on the internet, because they're on the internet. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of crazy that you would say something so insane about somebody, but then you see them 2 hours later, and you would ask them for their autograph. No doubt about it, you would ask them to take a picture, And I think sometimes people trash fighters online because they see other people do it, and they kind of think that's just how the world is. Like, that's just, deep down, they don't even mean offense by it. They don't even mean offense. Like, they still like you, but they talk crazy about you at the same time. It's a weird it's a weird phenomenon for sure.
There's too many followers. Too many followers in this world.
There's too many haters. There's too many people who just have no problem not even thinking about their words. They just say whatever they want about a fighter. And part of it, whether they want to admit it or not, they don't even have to. Part of it is because they know they're never going to have to face retribution. You get there's 1 million people on this earth. There's 10 million people. There's 100 million people on this earth who, if given the opportunity on the internet, would tell everybody on their Facebook what a dirty rapist Mike Tyson is. And if Mike Tyson approached them the following day, they would either be scared to death, they would ask for a picture, and they certainly wouldn't have the same energy. One thing I know, of those 10 million people, if they were alone with Mike Tyson, I remember they have to be alone. They're alone in a room with no camera. It would be 10 million to 0. None of them would call him a rapist. None of them. You understand? They'd be alone. They wouldn't say a word negative to Mike Tyson. And you're going to have people commenting, going, I would. No, you wouldn't. And you say that now because you know you're not going to have to face that situation. Everybody says what they would do, knowing they're never going to have to. It's human nature. People say, I would have punched Will Smith back. Really? Maybe you would have been knocked out. Maybe you would have been dizzy. Maybe your mouth would have been bleeding. Maybe the shock of Will Smith smashing you would have been enough for you to go, you know what? I don't want that to happen again. So it's easy to say you would have beat Will Smith up, but people say a lot of stuff that in reality they don't mean. And they don't even know they don't mean it because they've never been in the situation to have to prove it. They just say it and they forget about it because they know they're never going to have to, they're never going to have to prove it to anyone on earth.
You're right. And it's funny you mentioned Mike Tyson, when he was in Toronto years ago and he was on a show here, some reporter had him on TV, brought up the rape. He brought up the rape.
I saw that.
There was a lot of guys that were actually upset at Mike Tyson for his reaction. And I was like, why are these guys complaining?
Right.
It's not Mike Tyson's fault. He has the right to be upset. Why did the guy on TV bring up this rape trial? This rape.
Yeah. I mean, there's some things that are just common sense. Like if you have a guest on a show, there's certain things not to bring it up. Like, and I'll tell you what, I guarantee, I know I'm more than sure the guy thought, I'm going to bring it up. It's a hot topic. It's going to go viral. People are going to, praise me for asking the tough questions. But Mike's a different type of dude. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to just fool him and bait him into the nonsense. And, there's a lot of guys. It would be like, I can't even think of examples, but there's certain people, there's certain topics you don't bring up. It's just disrespectful. It is what it is. And as a human being, you should know better. You do know better. But your desire, your search for clout overpowers your common sense. And, and like I say, a lot of guys, they would say, yeah, if I had Mike Tyson, I would ask him. I would ask him about it. And they wouldn't. Once they face, I had a guy, I'll tell you an example. I knew a guy way back in the day, right? And he told me OJ is a murderer. And he said, if I ever saw OJ Simpson, I would tell him to his face, he's a murderer. I said, nah. I said, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't. So like a year later, probably, I get a phone call. And the guy calls me and he's like, I'm at the mall. And I'm like, all right, you're at the mall. He goes, OJ's here signing autographs. I said, really? OJ Simpson's at the mall. And you went to see him? I said, did you say anything to him? He goes, yep. I said, yeah. I said, what'd you say? He said, hey, OJ, how you doing, man? What's up? And he shook OJ's hand. He didn't call him a murderer, just like I knew he would, because saying it, on the phone to your friend and saying it in the face of the person, that's two different worlds.
That guy was shitting bricks.
Yeah, well, no, because he knew he wasn't going to have to. No, he wasn't. He wasn't worried at all because he knew he wasn't going to antagonize O.J. Simpson in his face. He did it on the phone when O.J. wasn't listening, but in his face, so that's my point. He wasn't scared because he knew he wasn't going to bring it there, which is the vast majority of people. Like that guy who said that to me the day after the fight I lost. He said it in a car that was driving by my house, knowing that I wouldn't even know who it is because by the time I got out there, he'd be gone. Now, would he say that to me face to face in a supermarket? I'm betting no. I've certainly betting no. Yeah.
You know what would have been funny if that guy would have drove off and crashed. And
No,
caught up to
that's what I was hoping. I was hoping he would get a flat tire or something, and I promise you, and maybe I regret it, but I was going to do some damage, to the car and him. I was going to do, it was the day after the fight. I was not in the mood. It was the wrong team. And part of it was someone, just like these online people, someone who felt he was entitled and he was brave saying this, knowing he wasn't going to have to face me, and that's just, there's no, if there's one negative about the internet, that's probably it.
It's crazy. It's crazy. This internet world that we live in. Social media.
I've had so many people on the internet disagree with me with different things, and and they get really stupid and really ignorant, and I had one guy, I'll never forget his name was Rudy. This was like 15 years ago, and he was on the internet on this message board. We used to talk about boxing. Crazy. We used to talk about a lot of boxing, and back then on AOL it was easy to figure out. I could research stuff, and what I do is, this is a little secret of mine, I keep track of everything. Like when I trained fighters, when I was fighting, I would watch the fighters in my division, and I would pay attention to things they said, just any little bit of information maybe I could use down the line. So sure enough, this guy started getting really abusive with me on the internet because he disagreed with something that I said. I remember he said he had a better jab than some pros. And I said, oh man, how many fights you got? And he didn't have fights. He didn't box at all. He said, and I'll never forget, he said he understood physics because he used to play baseball. And I told him, well, why don't you go to a gym where you live and ask for the best fighter in the gym and see if you could spar and you could show him your jab and see how it works. So he got really, really abusive. So I figured out all the stuff he had told me over the previous months, and I figured out his name. I figured out a way to research it. I found his name. I found his wife's name. I found his address. So I put it on the message board. I said, listen, I said his name. I said his wife's name. I said his address. I said, listen, you talk too much, all right? But this is your address. It is exactly 91 miles from my house. I have it map quested out in case I need it. Keep talking, and I'm going to knock on your door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we can figure it out. I never heard from him again. So people, when faced with reality, they react like rational people as opposed to just reckless. I know a guy, his life revolves around finding all the famous people that he can't stand or he has problems with on Facebook, and he sends them messages like really ignorant stuff, like criticizing their looks and their acting and their singing. And I told him, I said, you're a coward. I said, you don't even realize what a low human being you are. You have no idea what you're doing. Like, you're the worst of humanity, and you don't even know it. Like, sit back one day and look at yourself. Look at what you do, and really look at it from an outside perspective, and think: is this what you want your kids to grow up emulating? Do you want them to be like you? I mean, I can't imagine that you do.
Yeah, these guys have no life.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. That's part of it for sure.
Hey, I just thought about this one guy I knew from back in the days. This guy would talk big game, and I remember one day, I'm running all over the gyms and doing interviews, and I just left this gym and I bumped into this guy that I knew. So he asked me, where are you coming from? And I said, oh, I'm coming from a boxing gym. And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, why don't you take me there? And I go, for what? And he goes, so I can spar some of those fighters. And I go, spar? I go, you've never even fought before. You've never even trained before. And he goes, yeah, don't worry, buddy. He goes, I'll kick their ass. I'll kick all those guys' asses. I'll go in the ring. I'll beat the shit out of them. I'm like, this guy's crazy. What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, don't worry, buddy. He goes, just take me to the gym. I should have took him.
I would have took him 100%. I would have took him 100%. I would have took him. Yeah, yeah. Now, people like that, it's almost like every man on earth at some point should box with someone. They should spar with someone just to see how hard it is. I'll give you an example. You see people criticize football players, right? And, a guy drops a pass. Oh, you suck.
I can't.
I said people criticize football players, and a guy drops a pass, and they go, man, you get, $2 million a year to catch a football. You can't even catch the ball. I said, listen, do you understand how hard a professional quarterback throws a ball to you when you're crossing the middle? How fast and hard that is. Do you know what that football would do to the average man walking on the street? Like, it might kill you. It would break your ribs. You wouldn't be able to handle it. It would burn the skin off of your hands if you tried to catch it. They don't understand, like, the level that it takes to compete. And they're critical because they fail when these people couldn't even attempt to do what these guys are failing at a quarter of the time. Usually they're successful. Most pro athletes are successful in what they do. But when they fail, people who couldn't do it in a million years criticize them for it. And sometimes it's not even the criticism. It's the venom. It's the hate in the words and the tone that are weird. It's weird. Like, people are weird when they're on the internet talking about people. It's just it's a weird phenomenon that we have to deal with, because we want to be online too. We want to talk, and you have to deal. That's why me as a boxer, any boxer, any note, anyone who's recognizable, right? If I'm not recognizable and I'm in a boxing chat room and I talk to a guy and I say, I think you're wrong, and they'll go, oh, I don't know, no. But if it's me and they know, they go, oh, I saw you lose on TV. I go, so because you saw me lose a fight on television, that means I can't have an opinion of a fight next Saturday in the welterweight division? Like, because I lost a fight that you happened to witness, now my opinion is not valid, but it was valid when the guy is an anonymous name. His screen name is Bull Dagger. And all of a sudden he's okay to give an opinion, but because you saw me fight and lose, now my opinion is valid? Like, people have a twisted idea of what counts and what doesn't.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, man, it is crazy, and people don't realize it. They have no idea that they're crazy. They have no idea that they're mean. People have no idea that they're mean-spirited people. They're on the internet and they say things to people, famous people, and then they forget about it. 10 seconds later, they've forgotten about it. But the guy they said it to is thinking about it for 2 days, and he's wondering, how can some total stranger be so mean to me just because I lost a fight on television? Like, where does he get the balls and the right to think he could do that? And meanwhile, the guy forgot about it. He doesn't even consider it mean. He doesn't even consider it at all. He doesn't even think about it. It's crazy.
Too many trolls on the internet.
Yeah, for sure.
Too many trolls. And I have to mention this one more thing about this guy that wanted to go to the boxing gym. A few weeks later, after that happened, I was playing soccer at that time. So he said, can I join in? And I said, okay, come whenever you want. And since he used to smoke like 10 packs a day, he comes and plays soccer, and then 5 minutes later, he passes out. And I thought he was joking, but he wasn't joking. He actually passed out. So imagine how he would have done it in a boxing gym.
Listen, people are crazy. People are crazy. They're nuts. Like, people say what they would have done. And that's a famous thing. Like, if I was there, I would have done this. I would have done. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. You think you would because you don't have to, because you're on the internet. You're in your house. You're watching, TV. Everybody could think they would do something, but they wouldn't. The majority of people wouldn't do anything compared to what they said they would do.
It is insane, but I have to ask you about the main event now. The main event, Tank Davis and Hector Luis Garcia. Your thoughts on that fight? Because I wasn't too impressed with Hector Luis Garcia. He wasn't busy enough.
Right.
What do you think?
I thought he did well enough. I think Tank loads up enough, a little too much. I think he's a good fighter, obviously. He's trying to set you up for traps, and he's he's got power. I thought he showed some weaknesses. I thought there were some vulnerabilities there last night. But if a guy stands there with him, trading with him, they're gonna probably get hurt. It's gonna take a good fighter. I honestly think Ryan Garcia. I think Ryan Garcia would give him a really, really good test. Just all things considered, I think Ryan would be on his game. I think him and Tank would be an excellent fight.
What do you say to those that say, well, Ryan Garcia has hit the canvas before, but he got up though. He didn't stay.
Yeah, look, Muhammad Ali hit the canvas, right? So that meant he was supposed to get knocked out by George Foreman because he had hit the canvas against Doug Jones, who weighed like 190 pounds. Every circumstance is different. Everything is different. It does, what happened before is irrelevant when it comes to the next fight in most cases. So, of course, maybe he was lackadaisical against that guy, but he wouldn't be lackadaisical against Tank. He'd have a different mentality at the point of impact because he's fighting Tank Davis. He would step his game up psychologically, emotionally, mentally, physically.
Do you think we'll see Tank Davis fight after that Ryan Garcia fight? Because I saw an interview with Tank Davis saying that he's pretty much done with boxing and he's looking to retiring. You think that's his last fight?
I don't believe that. I don't believe that. But guys always say that. But with that kind of money floating around, if I'm going to bet $1,000, I'll say Tank keeps fighting. I don't think that's going to be his last fight.
So that means that we'll possibly see Tank Davis versus Lomachenko or
You can't leave those fights on the table. If he beats Garcia, you can't leave those fights out there. You gotta take those fights. Come on, this is what you're here for.
But we've seen in the past, some fights haven't happened.
Right, but I'm saying you can't retire, like that. That can't be the reason they didn't happen because you decided to retire.
And I gotta bring it back to Ellis and Villa, I believe it was, when the crowd erupted and there was a fight breaking out in the crowd. I'm not sure. I believe it was that fight. What were your thoughts when the referee stopped the fight?
Well, you know what that was? Apparently, it was the rapper Meek Mill and what's his name? The kid from DC, Gary Russell. It was Meek Mill and Gary Russell, I guess, got into some kind of altercation, and then both of their groups joined in. So that's what that was. I don't have a problem with them stopping the fight at that moment. It's obviously it's a distraction that needed to be rectified, and they probably thought it was looking like it was going to get worse, and it might turn out the whole crowd's into the fight, fighting each other. So yeah, I have no problem with them stopping the fight.
What's your thoughts on some rappers getting in with some of these fighters, like wanting to fight some fighters? I don't get it.
I'll tell you what, and it's a whole nother subject, but the rap community, right? Like people say, oh, well, you don't complain about country music. So yeah, but country music people don't shoot each other. Like they don't. It's just what it is. We can't pretend it doesn't happen. Like within that community, there's street beefs and there's music beefs and there's all these issues. That's the vibe. That's the clientele. That's who it is. Like guys will go on, the Breakfast Club, right? And they will go out of their way to portray that image. They will go out of their way to show you they're a tough guy. You had Birdman, you had the other guy, Beanie Siegel. They go on there and they want to prove to you that that's who they are. And everyone around them wants to prove that they're like that too. Well, when you get 50 of those guys at a fight, that's who they're going to be. That's what's going to happen. So it's not a surprise that these type of things are going to happen. You can't, on the one hand, I guess you can't prevent rappers from coming in with the fighter, but at least let them be good. I mean, sometimes I see some of these guys rapping on the way to the ring and I'm like, man, how did this guy get on TV? like I'm not a rap genius, but I know when someone's not good. I know when the voice and the rhyme is not good. And some of these guys, it's just their friend they're putting on, doing them a favor. And it's like, man, you gotta get new friends, man. We need somebody else. And but the vibe, like when Tyson fought, that's when Tupac got killed. I mean, there you go. Tupac got killed the night after the fight when Tyson drew that kind of crowd. And that's the kind of crowd that was there. And that's the kind of crowd that ended with Tupac dying that night. Now, I'm not saying these people shouldn't go to the show. I'm just saying if you bring certain kind of rappers rapping certain lyrics and you hang with that type of crowd and that crowd is at the fight, there's a chance more than if you had Miley Cyrus as the lead act for you on the way to the ring. You know what I mean? Miley Cyrus wouldn't end with that kind of drama. So, you bring certain guys, you have to assume the possibility is higher. You know what I mean? Lawrence Welk, not so much. Frank Sinatra, probably not. But Tupac, maybe so. Maybe we're going to have an issue tonight.
Speaking of Tupac, I saw an interview recently with Ice-T, and Ice-T made a good point. Ice-T said that he once told Tupac to stay away from the streets because Tupac wasn't really a gangster. He was just a rapper. And
yeah.
He told Tupac, you're not part of the gangs. You're not part of those LA gangs.
Right.
Stay away from the streets because this is not going to end well for you. And we saw what happened.
Look, a lot of these entertainers, here's the thing about Tupac, right? If you watch videos of Tupac Shakur when he was 17, 18, being interviewed casually, like not a formal interview, but just on a couch somewhere talking to some guy, you can clearly see he's not a thug. Tupac was not a thug. He became a thug. He became a thug, the image. But you can see when he's a kid, 17, he wasn't a thug. He wasn't he wasn't that kind of guy. But he wanted to be that type of guy. And it's part of the image. You get in the rap industry, and it's been proven numerous times over the years that you have people whose identities are literally made up. Like the record company will tell you, I have a friend of mine in the industry, and he tells me, he says, they'll tell a guy, you need to get a tattoo. You need a teardrop tattoo. We need to tell people you've been arrested before. We need to make up this story about you so you can have credibility with the people who are going to buy your records, because they don't want to hear that type of music from a guy from, Orlando, Florida, who grew up in, a nice neighborhood. And you know what I mean? So a lot of it is image. And I would say in the majority of cases, real thugs, like true deep down thugs, they're too busy being thugs. They don't have time to rap. These guys don't have time to sing. You know what I mean? They're too busy being thugs and doing what thugs do. That's their life. Their life isn't in this music studio. You know what I mean? So I think real thugs maybe are attracted to certain fighters, and some people are attracted to real thugs, and they want to present that image. And in the music industry, like I say, I know for a fact, and it goes back even so far as like with Vanilla Ice. You remember they made up his life. They made up a story about him to give him credibility. Well, you think he's the only one? You think he's the only guy they did? Of course, they do it for tons of them. And that's just the reality of it's the entertainment world. And these guys, they're actors. I mean, that's their job. They're actors. Tupac acted very well. He acted like a thug, and he did it well. You know, that's the way it is.
And let me just mention one more thing that has nothing to do with hip hop, but since we're talking about the music, Milli Vanilli.
Yeah. Hey, you know what's crazy? I love this song. I love the girl. Man, what was the song? I forget the name of the song, but they had a really good slow song. And then you find that, well, you know what? But that's kind of what I'm saying. The guys who really sang the song were heavy set guys. They were not, you know, model looking guys that the girls would go crazy over. So they said, basically, we don't care about the music. We need the face to go with the music, right? And that's a perfect example of that. Those two guys could have sang their songs on their own. Nice songs, catchy songs, right? The same exact songs. They did sing them. But because they were heavy-set guys, girls wouldn't have went crazy over them. They wouldn't have made the money. They wouldn't have made the attention. They might not ever even got a break. So they had to pretend. Milli Vanilli had to pretend the same way so many rappers pretend.
I'll end it off with this because, you know, since that fight was paused for a bit because of that scuffle that happened, that reminded me of when
Holyfield.
Victor Chinyan fought Iron Pacheco, and there was fireworks out in the crowd. For some reason, there was some fireworks. They were fighting outside. The ring was outside, and the fight got stopped when Victor Chinyan was about to get knocked out. But because of the fireworks, somehow the referee stopped the fight, and Irene Pacheco didn't get the opportunity to knock out Victor Chinyan.
So you know what happens next time? Next time they fight outside, somebody brings fireworks, and they go, listen, if I get in trouble, you start lighting these up, man. You know what I mean? Like as crazy as it sounds, even just to be funny, I would do that. I say, hey, here's a couple M80s. If I start getting hurt, start lighting them off.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I still have that fight on VHS. I'll upload it one day on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But Iceman, as always, it's fun. It was a fun time. We'll do this again.
Yes, sir.
And January 28th, Beterbiev versus Yarde.
Yeah, we're getting ready. We'll be there.
Your prediction?
You know, I mean, I never really predict. I mean, I can't see Arthur losing. I think we have to be careful. We have to fight the right fight, just like always. Our guy, Yarde is dangerous. He can be dangerous. And, but Arthur knows that. Like, you never have to remind Arthur. If he fought his grandmother, he'd be ready for Tyson. You know what I mean? He'd be ready 100%. So that's not going to be a problem.
Just be ready, because Yarde is going to move around.
Yeah. No, we got every strategy covered, I believe.
Iceman,
yeah.
Once again, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.